The moment that history was made was the moment that Sofronio Vasquez was declared the victor of The Voice Season 26. This is the first time that a competitor of Filipino and Asian descent has won the highly sought-after title. In addition to taking home the trophy, the winner has also earned the pride of millions of viewers who were watching from all around the globe. Michael Bublé, who was his first-time coach, could not keep from crying. There was an explosion of activity on the stage. Social media platforms experienced a massive surge in activity. Celebrations erupted across the Philippines as though a national holiday had been announced. That being said, it did not take long for a different type of storm to brew on the internet. Even while the singer's win was met with widespread praise, a few Filipinos started to closely examine the story of the singer's past, the compelling narrative that NBC offered to viewers. Sofronio was presented as a young man who was raised in a state of poverty, with no bed or indoor plumbing, and who gained notoriety as a result of his exceptional tenacity. It was a story that was moving, inspiring, and impossible to ignore. The type of story that The Voice frequently brings attention to. However, when the audience continued to research his history, assertions started to emerge that the circumstances surrounding Sofronio's upbringing might not have been as destitute as depicted. In contrast, critics contended that he had ties to the well-known Parojinog political clan in Misamis Occidental, a family that gained notoriety during the War on Drugs, a very controversial conflict that took place in the Philippines. Suddenly, the inspirational story of a meek person who triumphed against the odds started to collapse under the weight of public scrutiny. The question that remains unanswered is, did Sofronio Vasquez's story of rising from poverty to wealth and success really happen? A triumph that stunned the entire globe. A rising that was reminiscent of a fairy tale took place in the eyes of the world prior to the emergence of the dispute. The several performances that Sofronio delivered during the season demonstrated an uncommon combination of unrefined and polished qualities, with an emotionally charged delivery accompanied by an apparently easy mastery of his vocal abilities. When the competition became more intense and the potential rewards increased, Michael Bublé was quick to acknowledge his exceptional abilities and provided him with support. With a level of profundity that gave the impression of being both lived in and somewhat ghostly, Sofronio performed his vocalizations week after week. He talked frankly about what it was like to grow up without the most basic amenities, and he recounted the difficulties that his family faced in their battle against poverty and adversity. The lack of a bed, the absence of indoor plumbing, and a childhood characterized by survival rather than enjoyment were topics that he frequently brought up in conversation. That vulnerability allowed him to earn the affection of the audience. The ingredients for a reality competition victor were classic: an enormous amount of talent, an enormous amount of humility, and an enormous amount of adversity. However, the more that a candidate is adored, the more closely their tale is scrutinized, and the level of scrutiny in Sofronio's case was particularly high. The connection of the Parojinogs. Not long after he had won, followers started to spread details about his personal history through online platforms. The Parojinogs, a political family hailing from Misamis Occidental that has been noted for its dominance as well as its scandals, were referenced by several commentators. It was not long before it became clear that Ida Parojinog Vasquez, Sofronio's mother, was one of the sisters of Reynaldo Aldon Parojinog, who was the former mayor of Ozamis City until he passed away. In 2017, the previous mayor of the city was assassinated during a police raid that was connected to the Philippines' controversial war on drugs. The tragedy made headlines throughout the world and resulted in the deaths of 4 members of the family. A significant number of those who saw were left speechless. The relationship was not in accordance with the humble background that NBC had highlighted. There were many who questioned how a person who was born into the poverty conditions that were described could have possibly grown up to be a member of a political family, particularly one as well known as the Parojinogs. The term Parojinog is associated with a number of negative connotations in the Philippines, which adds another layer of complexity to the situation. While critics accuse them of having a significant role in corruption and illicit activities, supporters maintain that the family was unfairly attacked. The reality of the situation is convoluted and has a significant political dimension. However, the inquiry became more pronounced no matter what one's perspective was. If Sofronio came from a household like that, was his upbringing as impoverished as the voice implied that it was? A family with distinct realities. Others stepped forward to provide further information as the argument was disseminated over the internet. There were certain residents of Misamis Occidental who said that although some branches of the Paraginog family were affluent and had political influence, other branches, such as the branch of Sofronio's mother, lived in a more humble manner. They proposed the idea that the family was not wealthy in a consistent manner, and that the prominence they had in politics did not automatically extend to every single household. Ida Paraginog Vasquez and the members of her immediate family did not have a lifestyle that might be considered luxurious. As reported by these sources, it is possible that they were tied by blood to a prominent clan, but not every single one of their relatives lived in the same circumstances, possessed the same social rank, or had access to the same financial means. The structure of extended families in the Philippines can be both complex and extensive, with family members residing in a variety of towns, provinces, and socio-economic backgrounds. One can be a member of a political dynasty without adopting the way of life that is typically associated with it. However, many who had doubts questioned the reasons for Sofronio and NBC's failure to make those distinctions more apparent. Once the spotlight falls on a person, it is common for assumptions, whether they are fair or not, to fill in the gaps of ambiguity. Reality television narratives, where they go wrong. In many cases, reality competition shows depend heavily on the backgrounds of the people who participate. A compelling story enhances the emotional bond, boosts the investment of the audience, and raises the probability of viewers' votes. This is something that producers are aware of. The competitors are aware of this fact. This is something that is known to viewers. However, what transpires in the event that someone challenges that narrative? What many people dispute is whether or not Sofronio actually endured suffering. But this is not the only possible problem. The fact that his story has been modified, simplified, or exaggerated in order to fit the familiar television formula of the underdog rising from poverty is the actual issue of concern. This formula is effective. It has given rise to an innumerable amount of fan favorites. However, it has also been massaged for a considerable amount of time in order to achieve the desired outcome. Over the years, a number of former participants in singing competitions, from American Idol to The Voice and beyond, have come up with the claim that producers frequently urge them to promote particular storylines. Sometimes, these storylines magnify their struggles, other times they minimize their advantages in order to create a more attractive narrative. The topic has not been addressed by Sofronio in any way, and NBC has not made any clarifications or changes to his biography. Unless and until formal remarks are released, the story is still being shaped by the opinions of those who support it, those who oppose it, and others who are simply observing. The response of the public, an audience that is split. The response that was seen on social media platforms was intense, emotive, and split right down the middle. Those who were in favor of the project contended that the criticism was unjust, superfluous, or motivated by envy. They were insistent that Sofronio's success ought to be celebrated and not examined. They drew attention to the fact that his diligence, skill, and devotion to the task at hand were the most important aspects of his performance, and they also reminded detractors that the circumstances of one's upbringing, whether they are affluent or impoverished, do not determine the extent of the difficulties that one faces in life. When his supposed connections to his family were taken into account, skeptics asserted that the depiction of Sofronio as a boy who had nothing at all was deceptive. There were others who raised the topic of whether or not NBC ought to have investigated the story in a more comprehensive manner. The people who watched it in the Philippines were especially outspoken. There was a sense of pride in his accomplishment that was shared by many others. Yet, this feeling was accompanied by discomfort due to the fact that they perceived the story to be one that had likely been exaggerated. Others made the case that being raised in a political clan during times of upheaval could be just as difficult, if not in different ways. The conversation progressed past Sofronio as an individual and transformed into a wider debate regarding authenticity, representation, and the narratives that are projected on platforms on a global scale. The part that Michael Bublé plays in the narrative. Michael Bublé's participation in the midst of the controversy introduces an additional emotional dimension. Bublé entered the competition with a genuine sense of warmth and excitement, given that this was his first time serving as a coach on The Voice. His relationship with Sofronio as a mentee was genuine, heartfelt, and intensely personal. Sofronio was publicly praised on multiple occasions by Bublé during the course of the season, and he was referred to as being one of the most naturally gifted singers that Bublé had ever coached. Sofronio's capacity for humility and his emotional fortitude were sentiments that the songwriter and singer frequently conveyed through their music. For Bublé, the narrative did not revolve around ancestry or upbringing. It was a matter of musical expression, connection, and natural ability. Regardless of whether or not the story of Sofronio's rise from rags to riches is true, there is no doubt that Bublé had faith in Sofronio's artistic abilities. Is it possible for both stories to be accurate? This contradiction is at the root of the controversy. Is it possible for Sofronio to come from a well-known political family and yet grow up in poverty? In a majority of instances, the response is affirmative. It is not a given that extended family members will share their riches with one another. One branch of government may have more political or economic authority than another branch, which could lead to a battle between the two. This is especially true in the Philippines, a country where the gap between the rich and the poor is so large that even the relatives of those who hold significant power might be forced to live in challenging circumstances. Due to the fact that television storytelling tends to favor narratives that are straightforward, this particular subtlety is sometimes overlooked. However, the reality of the situation is more complicated. The histories of families are full of complexities. Poverty is also present even in the immediate vicinity of those in positions of authority. An indisputable ability. Regardless of the doubts that have been brought up, one fact remains unchanged. The fact that Sofronio Vasquez won The Voice was due to his remarkable talent. Millions of people were profoundly moved by the sound of his voice. The applause that he received was a result of his performances. The genuineness of his emotions gave rise to instances that would remain in the memories of the audience for years to come. There is just no way that something can be taken away, no matter how much you argue about it on the internet. If anything, the debate brings attention to the demands that are placed upon artists, particularly those who represent oppressed communities. Whenever someone manages to break down barriers, they are subjected to extreme scrutiny, and their tale is broken down into its component parts and discussed until every single aspect has been studied. However, the fundamental element of The Voice is music rather than ancestry, and Sofronio fulfilled his promise. What is going to take place subsequently? With the dust gradually settling, Sofronio is now facing the task of navigating his newfound celebrity while remaining under the watchful eye of the public. His future endeavors, including musical releases, public appearances, and interviews, could provide additional information regarding the events of his life. In the future, he might choose to explicitly address the topic. Alternatively, he can opt to let his music to communicate without the need for any verbal or written interpretation. Regardless, The Voice has pushed him into a global prominence that has not been achieved by many Filipino performers. His triumph remains a significant moment in time. His level of talent is indisputable to this very day. His influence on culture continues to be a tangible reality. And maybe, as the world comes to know more about him, a more comprehensive portrait will begin to take shape, one that pays tribute to both the difficult circumstances he has faced and the intricacies of the family he descends from. An intricate inheritance, a moment of great significance. The victory that Sofronio Vasquez achieved is still considered to be a historic one. It symbolizes the representation, opportunities, and the extent to which Filipino talent is recognized on a global platform. At the same time, the story of his life serves as a reminder that reality television narratives are not always as straightforward as they seem at first glance. Stories of people rising from rags to riches are often uplifting, However, genuine individuals, genuine families, and genuine lives are frequently far more complicated than that. The fact that a talented Filipino singer graced an American stage, won over the hearts of millions of people, and made history cannot be disputed.